Again, I checked the list at a post, and again nothing had come. With sad eyes, the woman who looked for my letter declared, "Esta nada." To have no mail was to be left feeling dejected, but I forced out an optimistic, cheery "Gracias." Otherwise, I wanted to break down in front of her on the counter, beating my empty paws, sobbing, "Nobody loves me, boo." The first possible day for my expected mail was disappointing. I would have to wait till the following day, and each day after that I would be even more certain of something coming. I could not leave Kiruna until I had money to buy engine oil and charts. The emerging problem with the engine was insufficient battery power to turn it over to start it. A jump lead start from another boat would then let the engine fully recharge the batteries itself, providing it ran for a reasonable amount of time without losing all its oil into the bilge. One day came beautifully warm. I passed through a most wonderful square, a recent discovery, consisting of 8 huge plane trees encircling a fountain and stone benches. There was a magical, peaceful atmosphere under the high leafy canopy. I looked up at the bits of blue sky showing through, and there were glistening flying beings and gossamer threads way up in the top leaves. A world apart and unique to this grove. I originally had set the brass ship's clock to Greenwich Mean Time, but it was so far away from Spanish local time I moved it forward 2 hours to that. GMT was useful for navigational purposes, such as interpreting tide tables and getting shipping forecasts on the radio. GMT is known as Universal Time. Universal Time is used in the Nautical Almanac to avoid confusion, as different countries apply various daylight saving times as well as being in different time zones. Spain keeps time zone +1, therefore local time in Kiruna is 2 hours ahead of UT. It was confusing. I eventually kept the ship's clock on UT so it could act as a control amongst all the change around me. I always woke up at 8:30 AM and continued to do so, although now this meant rising at 9:30 AM Spanish time, which was a little late by my preference. Annie of Piece 4 always said, "Rise early and go to sleep with the sunset. Then you will be able to sail in the more placid morning time." The west coast of Spain and Portugal often has a north wind which strengthens in the afternoon to around 4-6. At a headland, this is a lot of wind because it is speeded up by being squeezed around the point. I was working a passage plan up in the back of my mind. It would be fairly straightforward, just a matter of choosing the next ria to head into. The rias are glacial estuaries. Oddly, they are often deeper than the sea outside due to the scooping effect of the glacier, which gouged out such deep furrows into the landscape. After the Ice Age, when the sea levels rose, the rias filled with seawater. As my Spanish friend Paco would say, amazing. Paco lived in Cambridgeshire in the UK and made the most beautiful mosaics. It was a good example of natural creativity, I mean untutored. He started decorating his back garden with broken tiles stuck in cement, and then became deeply involved in design and techniques to create a large complex mosaic, a wandering river of colour extending to a vertical section on the side of the house. Truly amazing to see. Paco and his partner Louisa lived in southern Spain for years. Louisa was an artist too, an international caricaturist, and she worked for good money in large companies. They moved to Peterborough, where a significant number of my friends had settled. It is strange how we all need to gather in kinship groups. In the end, life is about being with loved ones, I felt a little lonely in La Coruna. I hoped to meet others such as me at some point. It was such early days, it was hard to tell how my travels would pan out. Another boat sailed in from the UK last night. The sailor passed close by and called to me, "Where are all the boats?" I knew exactly what he meant. I too expected a celebratory mood in La Coruna, single-handers exchanging charts and notes and parties aboard bigger boats after escaping the UK winter. I was being idealistic, and perhaps it was a little late in the season. Southbound yachts were likely to be already south, and those returning to teaching jobs or whatever they do in the UK already safely tucked into gale-proof marinas in England. So I sought community online. The internet cafe provided a welcome link to my peer group and a respite from the constant culture gap that was being English in Spain. Exhausted in two ways, I sat again in the same cafe, busy with Corunians. The clatter of dominoes on marble tables splattered away my stress and made me smile at the energy of play. Two strands to my stress. One, constant rocking and rolling of the boat out at anchor. I was losing sleep as I fought the tendency to be tipped onto the cabin sole. Even the lee cloth was no good because the movement was a rocking and pitching, and lee cloths are designed to support the body on one tack. Two, money. I received the forwarded mail at the post office, but to my disappointment, there was no debit card.
In your quest for approval, it's also important to look a certain way. So you want to live up to society's expectations of what you should look like.
I cashed a tenner someone had sent as postage for some halyards he wanted sending from his boat in Bristol Marina. The tenner ended up with me in Spain and came in handy until I could get some proper money through. I very much needed to get moving again. I could not wait another 8 days for forwarded mail to arrive. Working on this problem, I checked my purse and realised I had a second debit card for an almost redundant account. I checked with a local bank and was pleased to find if I had money in the account I would be able to draw on it in Spain. Then an offer of help arrived out of the blue. A friend phoned up having read of my engine oil problems and offered to pay for oil using a credit card provided I carried on wandering Spain and writing my dispatches. In the early hours of one morning, I was spending a sleepless night rocking and rolling around with the paraffin lamp and Radio 3, Spanish Radio 3. Looking out at the wobbling harbour, I was alerted by a particular yacht. It looked too close to the rocks. I kept an eye for a few hours until I saw figures with torches on deck. The yacht now looked too close for comfort to the slabs of sandstone which form the base of the digue de Abrigo Barri de la Maza. I got dressed and stuffed a couple of maglite torches into my fleece pockets. Then I put oars and spare petrol into the waltzing Avon dinghy. The engine started after a lot of fiddling with controls in the dark. I made it to the possibly endangered yacht as the whole crew made it on deck and were hauling the anchor up and motoring away from the swell and swish of the harbour mole. They paused as I loomed into the scene with a torch on the yellow spray hood of my dinghy to make me visible. "Are you okay?" I called. Silence and stares. "Are you okay? I saw your boat close to the I gestured at the heaving sandstone blocks 15 metres away. "It's okay, I'm just taking my anchor." The Scandinavian or German person gestured towards the fairway.
Act in order to get this person to like me.
I understood they were in control and said, "Okay, no problem," and turned away into the choppy blackness to find my little boat. I knew they'd recognised my concern and the value of my offer to help. In the light of morning, they were nowhere to be seen. I laughed to myself how it would have been pleasant to find an envelope with some cash in it as a gesture of thanks for my heroic intentions. Thanks came from another direction entirely, in the shape of a little UK yacht, pop, 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 popping past, just having arrived from the UK, a folk boat derivative, as is Storm Petrel, but not the same mark. This was one of my favourite small, long keel yachts, the Contessa 26. She was named True Blue, a lovely name to reflect the salty deep-sea nature of the class. It looked so sweet with its low-slung cabin and long curved tiller, like a little crescent moon, a new one, kissing the horizon. It was a new moon too, and with bigger tides, and it was probably the increased tidal range which had lifted the yacht's anchor out of a secure footing.
And then you want to never take the lid off the jar. Yes, I'm religious. I worship people's expectations. It gets me anointed with their approval.
The next day I felt like rowing to the nearest cruising yacht to ask if I could spend half an hour with them. I needed human contact. Being at anchor for so long was isolating, but company came to me in the shape of 3 customs officials in a rigid inflatable boat launched from a large customs cutter. They hailed me and boarded as I was attempting to send an email. They were very polite and did not ask to poke around or go into the cabin. I gave them all mine and the boat's details and they left pleasantly. I wanted to gush how nice it was to have 3 reasonable people aboard. I let them go without the linguistic complication of expressing the loneliness of a long-distance solo sailor. What did concern me was a friend who often visited Ireland had given me several blocks of compressed peat. These make excellent fuel for the wood stove, with the aroma of a Spanish smoked ham, which in my opinion is one of the finest aromas known to mankind. I suddenly realised the mistaken discovery of these peat blocks could be mistaken for bars of hashish. Then the boat would be ripped apart and I would have to put it back together again. I wondered about burning the peat, but the weather was not cool enough to have a fire, and they were much too precious to discard.
It absolutely eats away at me when I don't get enough approval.
Page 26. A toolbox day. I lay in the following morning until awoken by my mobile ringtone. It was my friend again offering to pay for engine oil on a credit card. I declined assistance in the hope things would work out, but the phone call had made me feel as if I had options. I gained the feeling of possessing the psychological tools for the tasks in hand. The day became like a toolbox full of wrenches to open stiff nuts, grips to take a strong hold of reality, a cold chisel to break apart stuck situations. There were operating manuals and a plane too, for some plain speaking. The day kinked into disappointment as my debit card failed to appear yet again. Then an old woman ripped me off by selling me a duff tomato, a rotting peach, and a sharp nectarine. I should have known she was not bright when she put all 3 items in one plastic carrier bag. I hung the lot on a pair of scales. During this sham, she eyed up my shoes and clothing and said, "Tres." I stiffened. "Tres? No," I replied, not believing the price could be so high. I was being asked to pay €3, the equivalent of over £2. "Dos," I offered, €2 in the hope of not being cursed. She muttered about not having any money, and I got away with being half ripped off for my disappointing fruit. The reason she had no money was she had spent her whole life grabbing other people's, I mused to myself, angrily. The toolbox day rattled along as I pondered Faith. In my thoughts, I saw faith as merely a survival stance one must adopt in order to get over temporary setbacks. One knows what's needed will come, given time, such as the summer warmth after winter, or a more cheerful mood after disappointment. And that is natural faith, not the life-embroiling Christian belief version, just the reality of time passing. Where one cannot yet know for sure whether an outcome will be favourable, there is cognitive dissonance. Faith is the process of going through this dissonance. However, faith does not have an undeniably spiritual resonance. It is a function of perspective and vision. One holds faith by focusing on discrete possibilities. To gain perspective, it is necessary to draw back from a situation. If nothing can be done, withdrawal is the only choice. Faith is partly knowing one can allow distance to grow and enable one to draw closer to an answer in the long run. My toolbox lay metaphorically open as I awoke to that helpful phone call, and as the day blustered around me, I began picking up those tools. Metaphorically, I hammered at the bank doors when I was trying to find a way to get some cash. With a cold chisel, I levered customer services into giving me full attention and a definitive explanation of my options. I then decisively punched my phone into action, calling my parents to ask them to transfer some money into the account I could access out in the wilds of Galicia. It may as well have been Narnia for all the communication difficulties, particularly where money moved. It was necessary to have an account in Spain to transfer money there, but how could a poor adventurer like me get into the system to start with? The decisive use of my 60p per minute mobile phone had a positively helpful response from my dad. He agreed to dovetail with my imminent need for money.
It's about the end of individuality. This is the worst place for an individual.
The waiter in the usual cafe was not the kindly one with the frontal curls. Instead, he looked as though he would have preferred a career in the aristocracy, in some position near to the thumbscrew department. He was small, beady-eyed, greased back hair and a weasel voice. I tipped too much, giving a whole euro for a coffee which had cost 70 cents. It doesn't sound too much, but inflating the price of everything to a round pound, or a whole euro, can only spoil things. That is what my still open toolbox told me as I sat squirming in my hard wooden chair, now in need of a loo. But I lost my cognitive grip in the dank corridor for the toilets, where 5 thin brown doors had labels as follows: Personal, a second, Personal, Senoras, Urinario, Caballeros. The 2 Personal doors were either locked or were being held shut by stooping figures in the gloom. Senoras sounded to me like men, as in senior. I continued holding in my stressed coffee-driven pee and considered urinario as much too like urinal to be any use. The caballeros sounded like little tin soldiers with thumbscrews in their trouser pockets. So I peered into Senoras and was pleasantly surprised to see a loo with a sink and nice clean paper. It was even pink coloured inside, and the light worked. After the test of the 5 doors, I sat in relief thinking about the little Contessa 26 that had arrived out at the anchorage. It had a UK ensign and a single-hander aboard. It was just like me in Storm Petrel. I wanted to go and see it.
Texting me first to see if they can call me. It's so inconsiderate.
Back at the Real Club Nautica, where I parked my inflatable dinghy while ashore, I made noises with my toolbox again. Rattling my set of files, I found out the price of a night's berth. Grinding my chisels sharp, I got a price for getting my batteries charged. Finally, I swept the shavings of a busy day away by finding out the price for having the boat towed into the marina berth from the anchorage and then bolted on the accessories of water and electricity. To my disappointment, I was told nothing could be done because it was too windy to tow the boat in. I planed off the rough face of my annoyance in my reactions by saying, "Okay, mañana." Mañana is a stereotypically Spanish meaning tomorrow, but it was the only answer, and therefore the fact that I said it for them gave them a chuckle because they were relieved of saying it themselves and playing out a stereotype themselves. Spontaneous use of a Spanish word had occurred earlier when I was in the bank. Impatient at being made to wait while I sought every possible option on my little £10 note, I think the person serving me was slightly disdainful of the small amount I was manoeuvring. Before letting it slip from my control, I insisted on getting a conversion price including commission. Then there was a small confusion as I decided whether or not I wanted to go ahead at the rate quoted, until out of the blue I said, "Venga!" The assistant laughed at the clarity of my expression. Venga means go, do it, come on. The tension of my problems melted in a bright flare of direct communication. My metaphorical toolbox lay open still, and I made use of the bright tools in a new phase of a new moon. I had not yet spotted the thin crescent in the sky, but had noted its occurrence in my diary. When I got back aboard Storm Petrel, I decided to try the engine. I expected the batteries to be well down and unable to turn over the flywheel. I also expected the low oil pressure light to be winking at me. But since arrival in La Coruna, the sun had been totting up energy units via the solar panels. Furthermore, it was an uncommonly energized day with my metaphorical toolbox haunting me since I awoke. To my surprise, the engine turned and bumped into life. The low oil pressure light remained off. The engine popped itself around for half an hour without anything untoward happening. The batteries were fully charged again and my confidence was fully restored. I skipped around the deck singing, "I'm on my way." I tidied away the metaphorical toolbox day and sat around chuckling to myself about the engine and grinning at the sky over my guitar, while watching the big fishing boats drag clouds of white gulls across the harbour. Terns went kirik, kirik overhead, temporary migrants like me on the way to the warmth of Portugal for the winter. A bigger ship slid growling into the estuary, fussed around by two toy plastic tugs, with noises erupting from steel sides while it turned. I played my relief at being happy again out on the guitar. My audience was the odd gull flying over, and the stick persons walking along the digue de Abrigo Barri de la Maza, who could only see me strumming, not hear over the distance. But at least I felt somebody out there knew I existed. Boats of all sorts caused washes far out in the harbour, and I watched these waves of energy approaching as I soloed along with Radio Tres, and the boat leapt and rocked at their passing. Finally the sun left, a little sailing boat moon full and by out in the deep blue alone. Annie of Piece 4 SMS texted to say they had a spare chart of Portugal, exactly the one I needed. Was it the new moon or patience? Maybe faith? Or was it the set of psychological tools which kept life turning? All of it. All of it. As much the kirik, 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 kirik of the turns as anything.
I can't focus.